Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Royal College of Art on a wet and rainy evening in December. A bit of housekeeping first. If there is a fire alarm, don't worry, the rain will put it out. No, I'm joking. There are exits here and also through the entrance that you came into. So welcome to the Royal College of Art. My name is Jonathan Boyd. I am the head of applied art at the college, and for the past 8 years, I have co-chaired the Peter Dormer Lecture Committee alongside design historian and writer Tanya Harrod. This year's iteration marks Tanya's and my final year as co-chairs, during which we've seen a diverse range of speakers on a wide number of topics, including Gus Casely-Hayford, who's joined us this evening, Helen Drutt, Deirdre Figueiredo, and Monica Gaspar, amongst others. Tonight is the 28th lecture in memory of Peter Dormer, welcoming the brilliant artist and 2024 Turner Prize winner, Jasleen Kaur. Before I properly introduce Jasleen, it is tradition to offer a short introduction to Peter's work and the remit of this series. The Peter Dormer Lecture series began the year after his passing in 1996. His wife, Jane Smith, and the then rector of the Royal College of Art, Christopher Frayling, and other friends and admirers set up the Peter Dormer Lecture series in his memory. Peter Dormer was already a well-established figure and friend at the Royal College of Art when he chose to embark on a PhD here. This PhD was published by Thames and Hudson as The Art of the Maker, an experiential book inspired by Michael Pogliani's ideas about tacit or personal knowledge. It was a groundbreaking attempt to understand and to bring value to the special kinds of knowledge involved in craft processes. Before that, Peter had studied painting, going on to read philosophy, teaching in schools, working in local government, and began writing for Art Monthly in 1978. Then in early 1980s, he made a bold decision to become a full-time writer and critic and curator, contributing a regular art lobby column to Art Monthly, which cast a witty, disenchanted eye over the state of funding for the arts, which seems still relevant, still very relatable. His writing and exhibitions he curated bristled with awkward questions and original perspectives, and towards the end of his life, he began to focus on what he saw as the essential work of the designer and the architect. His book, The Meanings of Modern Design, took an original look at the complex relationships designers have with consumers and at the symbolism, metaphor, and morality of product styling. For Peter Dormer, design, architecture, craft, and morality were inextricably linked. His 9 books, with 2 further books appearing posthumously, numerous exhibition catalogues, talks, and articles still offer fresh interpretations and thoughts. His writing anticipated the current interest in a broader interpretation of craft, going beyond the studio crafts into the wider world of making. The remit of this lecture is to honour this spirit by seeking intellectually ambitious, accessible, original, and outward-looking practitioners, writers, and researchers. Our speakers have diverse disciplines, foreground overlooked skills, engage broad and specific cultural questions, and look beyond their own practice to offer a panoramic view of material-led and making practices today. Today, we are going to look to focus on the trajectory of a jeweller turned applied artist turned fine artist, Jasleen Kaur, whose career has worked against a contemporaneous comment by Dormer and co-author Ralph Turner in their book, The New Jewellery, that very few jewellers attempt socio-political comment. This statement, written in the year of her birth, is overturned by an artist whose work, from jewellery through to her current practice, has always been both explicitly, implicitly, socially, politically active, aware, and critical. Born in 1986 and raised in a Sikh household in the Pollock-Shields area of Glasgow, Jasleen Kaur is a multimedia artist whose broad range of works include community artwork, installation, sculpture, designed artifacts, published writing, and sound art. It's a long list. Have I missed anything? Good. Her work often renegotiates renegotiates traditions through improvisation and reimagining the cultural and political ideologies that are embedded in everyday objects. Filled with sandstone tenements, and hemmed by the concrete arteries of the M77, Pollock-Shield reflects much of Glasgow's visual identity, embracing working class culture and the diversity of its shifting population. When she returns to Pollock-Shields, Jasleen says that she feels the presence of familial and historic narratives that are shaped by the decisions her relatives made to migrate there. Growing up, her father worked in hardware shops and cash and carries in the city. These local retail worlds carried and continue to carry with them strong visual identities, which in turn speak to the broader visual identity of the area. Day-glow orange iron brew, vortexing colours of polyurethane plastic cast buckets, and clutches of Scottish £1 notes. Whether through the cast bust that unsettled colonial figurative sculpture, hazy memories of family histories clouded by sugary orange haze, her work carries the language of this complexity and locality of familial histories. Her website describes this complexity as being raised amidst betrayal, secrecy, and banished outsiders. Influencing and making sense of what is out of our world of view or withheld. Ideas that are called towards plurality, I can never say that word, plurality, declassification, polyphony, and blur. Central to this is an idea that cultural memory and the layering of social histories exist within things. In 2004, Jasleen enrolled at the Glasgow School of Art. From this experience, she has commented that although it's a cliche, art saved my life, and it's still saving me today. I was extremely lucky to meet Jasleen there 21 years ago, which makes me feel very old. And Jasleen, apparently. I was a student in my final year of study, whilst Jasleen, a second-year student, sat directly behind me. From this seat, she would often question my art school stereotype hangovers. Why do you do it to yourself, Johnny? I couldn't find a sensible answer to that question then, and I can't find a sensible answer to that question now. Following Glasgow School of Art, it was at the RCA that Kaur's work expanded in scale and scope, developing a cobbling or bodging approach, but more recently described as a cut and paste approach. The social and political undercurrents of her previous work were coming to the fore, but with empathy, care, compassion, and humour, which underpins everything she does. Her work has moved further from the craft world due to a lack of conversation about diasporic identities and colonial and personal narratives. And this was supported by the Joe Woods Makers Prize and a residency at Cove Park, which opened new opportunities and spaces in contemporary art. Jasleen has gone on to be one of the UK's most significant artists. Achievements include the Turner Prize 2024, Paul Hamlin Award 2021, and nominations for the Luck Margaret Tate Awards and the Arts Foundation Award. Her work has been presented at major institutions such as Tate Britain, Tramway in Glasgow, the Wellcome Collection, and the Baltic Centre for Contemporary Art. And her works are held in the Arts Council Collection, Government Art Collection, and Craft Council. Accolades aside, though, her work is grounded in expanding the social reach of art, with major projects such as Be Like Teflon created through close collaboration with South Asian women foregrounding lived experience. And handing over to our speaker, Jasleen, I thought it'd be worth finishing with a short excerpt from Lisette May Monroe's 5-star Guardian review of Alter Alter, for which Jasleen was nominated for the Turner Prize. Monroe said, "Throughout Alter Alter, Kaur asks us to look at how we activate the things that define us, the objects and traditions we collect as we grow up and have the potential to define and confine us, acknowledging that we are not only have a responsibility to continue our traditions and histories, but also to renew them from the fragments they leave behind." I'm going to pass over to Jasleen. Thank you so much for coming and being here this evening.
Hi. Thanks for being here and thanks for inviting me to come and speak. I'm going to sit down, is that okay? Okay. This is a bit of an experiment to not speak to you project by project or chronologically. Instead, I want to speak to you about geography. The Marxist feminist geographer Doreen Massey describes geography as power-laden, describes how places are not bound, you can't draw a line around a place, and that the local is a victim of the global, which I also understand to mean your intimate world is forged by a wider set of forces. She says, a lot of the geography is in the mind. That is to say, that we carry around with us mental images of the world, of the country in which we live, all those images of the north-south divide, of the street next door. All of us carry such images. They may sometimes be in conflict or even be the cause of conflict. And digging these things up and talking about them is one good way in beginning to examine what it means to think geographically. I recently opened my solo show, Boomerang, at Hollybush Gardens, and whilst the title refers to the movement of a boomerang, it also refers to Amy Cézaire's theory of the imperial boomerang, revealing how violence cannot be contained. The imperial centre is the place where the boomerang's arc of flight begins, spelling out degradation across the spaces of empire before circling back to its origin. It's this entanglement, this cause and effect, that blurs the demarcation of over here and over there, how events happening elsewhere reverberate both on a macro level in public societal structures and on a micro level within the intimacy of our domestic lives and personal relationships. So I'm going to take you through a set of power-laden geographical locations that describe the various degrees of intimacies that I work with. They map a series of events and sites of conflict as a way to think through the forces that continually impact on one's life. Southern General Hospital, Govan. To borrow my friend and filmmaker Alia Said's words, Glasgow expelled me. It expelled me and women from every generation before me. You could say my obsession with place and its power geometries is down to this political shaping. Here, two anonymous women hold the artist in cradled arms. We view them through iron brew tinted glasses, their faces just about obscured by pieces of torn handmade roti. The tactic of concealing and revealing is employed to navigate making intimate work public. The work is full of secrets, and biography is only important insofar as it allows me to talk about wider socio-political structures. Firozpur, Punjab. The Anglo-Sikh wars between the Sikh and British empires in 1845 to 46 resulted in the defeat and partial subjugation of the Sikh empire. It is also 2009 at the RCA, and I walk past the statue every day for 2 years on my way to art school. I Googled the name on the statue to discover that the man on the horse, Lord Robert Napier, was a British military officer who served in both Anglo-Sikh wars. This is his great-grandchild, also named Robert Napier. And here's my dad, tying a turban on his head at Napier's home in Windsor, where he and his wife, with no irony whatsoever, served us a lunch of coronation chicken. For those of you that know my earlier work, produced in and from a jewellery department, this collapse of time and space, of pulling things back into relation, is an attempt to storytell, a kind of I am here because you were there. I don't think I could make this work now, but this cut and paste, making work in social life, away from the jeweller's bench, was something I was beginning to hone. Hardy's Hardware, Kilsyth. After the shipyards and in between markets on King Street, before the double yellow lines, yous opened a shop, Hardy's Hardware, an anglicisation of my dad's name, Hardeep. The Isles, my material education, and my ill-tempered father, and Gaffer, my political one. The first proper thing I learned to make was a key on his key cutting machine. The significance of aspirational materials, the social life of objects, detritus, residue, manufacture, import, export, value, which in art schools they called material culture, began here. Later on, failing to fit into the scene at the Glasgow School of Art, whilst Johnny was getting pissed, as an introverted young person with quite a lot going on, I sat down at my jeweller's bench, which became my safe space. I can still remember the smell of it, cold metal, hot wax, and acid baths. The workshop was familiar, not too lofty, a bit like a factory or a car garage. I could be there. Clyde Importers Cash and Carry. After my shifts, pricing and stacking homewares in the shop, the Tala Curry measure was conceived at the RCA, inspired by my tutor Carl Clerkin's provocation to make something hands off, as in hack a process of existing manufacturing. The original 1920s Tala Cook's measure is a dry weights measure. I know the brand from the shops, but first came across the product in markets and car boot sales, and in my bodging era, I adjust the internal design so that instead of measuring ingredients like sugar and flour, each column cooks an Indian dish: dal, roti, aloo gobi. It spoke of the intuitive, anti-metric approach to cooking I inherited from my mum. But I also wanted to make something that would be stocked in familiar cash and carries, full circle into the hardware shop shelves, hands off. The product goes into production in 2012. We manufacture 40,000. I get a terrible royalty. His feet. Punjab, Nairobi, Delhi, Glasgow. Poor boy, working class man, socially mobile, debt-ridden, eternally aspiring businessman. Waziristan, Pakistan. From the archives of the National Army Museum, my friend Jasleen is sending me WhatsApp messages of information he's been smuggling under the guise of his institutional role as Community Engagement Officer, funded through World War I Centenary Arts Funding. Filed under British colonels' names are material related to colonised people, insidious anthropological studies and army recruitment of the newly categorised martial races. He sends me this image of the Ludhiana Sikh regiment, farmers conscripted into the British Indian Army from my mum's village in Punjab. Here, they perform a series of warm-ups for the camera. A circus of men standing on each other's necks, balancing in unbelievable synchronised formation. The manufacture of martial races was a classification of certain groups who were seen to possess a biological or cultural disposition to the racial and masculine qualities necessary for acts of war, aka colonial masculinity. In her book, Listening to Images, theorist Tina Kampt, while looking at passport photos of subjects from the Commonwealth, teaches us that these images contain affect that cannot be captured by sight alone, that they require listening instead. She says, listening attentively to these mundane details means not accepting what we see as the truth of the image. She goes on to say, what kind of gendered performances do these images also capture? These are nameless men whose biographical details are withheld from us. Anonymous, black, or in this case, brown men, unless that is we attempt to listen than just merely view them. In 2019, my mum's hands gently hold each of them up, like a series of tree supports. Titled Women Hold Up Half the Sky, after a chapter in writer and activist Umrit Wilson's seminal book, Finding a Voice, Asian Women in Britain. There on their chests, that circle is a Sikh throwing blade. It keeps reappearing in photographs of British Indian designed army uniform, and as my friend's research suggests, it's the origin of the Kunda, the Sikh equivalent of the Christian cross. I make a tracksuit titled, He Walked Like He Owned Himself. I don't care much for nationalism, unless it's Scottish, but it is stitched in Punjab's saffron orange, like the mustard fields, and on the blue trim are embroidered weapons from the colonial Kunda down the arms and legs, just like Kappa. The construction and management of identity, how we wear, embody, and perform our prescribed identities, runs through this work. Nasreen's Intestines, Rochdale. Although the identity artist is often praised or accused of being very personal, the material of race, gender is not personal at all. Hannah Black. Interacting with the archive is disembodying. It promises truth. It is public, national memory, a reference point for the future, riddled with flaws. Lola Olufemi writes, "The archive, with all its shadows and gaps, is a colonial invention in narrative consistency." So what is the narrative of this place? What do we find when we go looking for ourselves in the archive? Several years of working in Rochdale, an ex-mill town, with its Punjabi, Pakistani and Bengali residents, with a desire to stop being swallowed into the fantasies of others, we produce a series of films documenting performances at local sites bound up in histories of empire and post-war migration from former colonies. We, members of the resulting diasporas, wash a statue of an industrialist with yogurt, walk endlessly, going nowhere in bucolic Lancashire landscape, and eat the contents of a public archive. I'm just going to show 5 minutes of the films.
Migration into Rochdale. Interview number 1, which took place in 1977. He was born in Amritsar about 10 years before the partition in 1947. He lived in a village with his family. His father had bought and sold oil. His first language had been Punjabi, but he also spoke Urdu. When India was partitioned in 1947, his family had to leave Amritsar. They moved to the city of Lalpur, now Faisalabad. In the new country of Pakistan, the whole family had to leave Amritsar very quickly at night. They were taken in army trucks to a camp in Pakistan before finding a home in Lalpur. In Lalpur, they had no relatives and felt isolated. Here, they eventually started a business for the manufacture and sale of soap. In Lalpur, they slowly adapted to a new life. He remembers how religion was very important to his family. They attended many religious functions. There was the Ramadan and the 2 Eid festivals every year. As he grew up, he began to take an active part in these, at times speaking in religious meetings. Then there was the visits to the cinema, private parties and many weddings. He remembered his panchayat system, where a group of 5 people from a small area of a new street would meet and try to help others with their personal problems, disputes between families, marriage breakdowns and divorce, questions about property and loans. The system was very old and thought it was useful in that situation. He also spoke well at the system of basic democracy, introduced when Ayub Khan was president of Pakistan. Lalpur was a large textile centre, a city of businessmen and factory workers. There was also a large agricultural university. Lalpur was a large modern city with good, educated and intelligent people. Why had he immigrated to Britain? He was working in his father's business and there was not much employment in Lalpur. He talked with a man who had lived in Britain for 10 years. This man spoke highly of the opportunities in Britain. It took him about 6 months to make the decision to come to Britain. His father tried hard to persuade him not to come. He was then married with 5 children. He came to Britain in 1962. There were no immigration controls at that time. On arrival, he looked around for some weeks, first in London, then in Glasgow. Eventually, a man persuaded him to come to Rochdale. In Rochdale, he quickly found work as a spinner and had worked in 4 different textile factories. He had recently become an assistant shift supervisor. It wasn't long after his arrival here that he began to miss his wife and family. He believed it was far better that they should live together. His wife had written several times suggesting that the family should be reunited as soon as possible. He had been living in lodgings with other men, but in 1964 he had decided to buy a home and bring his family here. The family had been back to Pakistan once for a holiday and stayed there for 10 months. They had made the journey by road in a van. Their route had been Belgium, Germany, Austria, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Iran, Iraq and Afghanistan. Wow.
story of the archive is the story of migration, is the story of empire, is the story of political, social and economic control. Writer and poet Suhaima Manzoor Khan writes about Yorkshire, mapping the geographies of slavery, UK mills and Britain's empire. She says, Yorkshire's textile mills and iron foundries were first built during rapid industrialisation in the 1800s by merchants whose money came from the slave trade. Profits made from enslaved labour were invested into new technologies such as locomotives, which were then exported to help pillage other colonies or raw materials that were turned into cloth, which colonised countries were forced to buy. In 1832, Indian weavers petitioned Parliament to complain that British cloth imports, alongside exploitatively high taxation on Indian cloth exports, were undermining their industry, pushing many to leave their jobs and eventually to simply export raw cotton that Britain would spin and sell back to them. The industrialisation of places such as Yorkshire was built through the deindustrialisation of India. She goes on to say that these conditions led to her granddad being in search of work in rural Punjab in the 1960s, later migrating to Bradford as many people did, working in the mills that had contributed to the impoverishment of their homeland. In knowing this, the machinations of empire, the archive's narrative is made inconsistent. Zarina Mohammed of The White Pube reviews the exhibition. She writes, I don't know how to say this without sounding like a pessimist. History is stuck, or we are stuck when history says we should be moving. Either way, something about the loop we're in feels like we're running in a dream, when your limbs are sticky and slow and the bad guy's close behind you. I don't want to look back, because we should be going forwards, but there's nowhere to fucking go. What is forwards? I don't know what's to be gained from renegotiating our relationship with history by looking back into the archives to see where we came from, because looking at the past and looking at the present, all I can see is that we haven't really gone anywhere. Tavy Bridge, Thamesmead. A director of regeneration who knows no one in the neighbourhood they're about to regenerate studies a PDF master plan of the newly marketed Thamesmead. Affordable housing, prime location, 20 minutes to the city, green space, great for mental and physical well-being, thriving community. Ta-Nehisi Coates says gentrification is a cute word for theft. In 2022, I'm invited by a group of young creatives from Thamesmead who are being employed and mentored to deliver a public artwork for their hometown. They send me one of the most genuine briefs I've ever received, where they speak about how the spectacle of Thamesmead's brutalist architecture features heavily in popular culture through film and music video, but what was missing from that remote view of the town were the people who lived in those buildings. Massey talks about how maps are not the only way to depict a place. We were interested in creating a work that countered this obsession with how Thamesmead looked, its stereotypes, and instead held the nuance and sensation and memory of living in a place. We were asking, how can this work map histories that would otherwise not be mapped? How do you make a place? How do you make for a place that is in the process of being unmade, only to be remade again? How can a public artwork gently hold the complexity and tension of the site? Between the 9 of us, we gathered a community group by inviting one guest to our workshops. Each week, the guest invites one more guest. The next week, that guest invited another guest, and so on. The group grows, we lose control in a good way of who is in the room. We ask residents to orient us around Thamesmead, not via a map, but by remembrance, asking, what would you salvage in this context of regeneration, and what is your centre in the context of developing new squares and new transport links? It was this process of mapping community spaces, and sensorial memories onto the windows of the library against the horizon of the sky that inspired this work. Lola Olufemi writes that art is best utilised as a weapon, a writing back, as evidence that we were here. We write a poem together and inscribe it on the newly glossed over facade of a rebranded square. Part poem, part archive, part community advocacy. We make a sculpture that attempts to hold the housing association to account long after we're gone, as to what kind of infrastructure should be prioritised when tasked with developing a place. The poem reads, "Whenever I'm down in my spirit, I go to the lake. Pictures of sunset on my phone, beautiful Crossway Park, Birchmere Festival, Tavy Bridge, Gogie's Supermarket, and there was a youth club. Smells of seasoning from homes. A sense of community is still ongoing. Horses are here." The dining room table, Crossmaloof. Raymond William writes that the word culture enters the English language in the 14th century, originally meaning the tending of something, as in attend to my sheep in the morning, attend to my crops in the afternoon. In 2019, I am tending, while pregnant with my first child, to histories of abuse near and far. Perhaps it was the psychology of my body being invaded by new life or something. I'm writing Be Like Teflon for the Glasgow Women's Library, a book of conversations with South Asian women. Conversations happen quite simply over acts of cooking and eating together, and through them arise stories, some unsaid, of precarity, grief and displacement. I have a little film which I'm going to play. It's about 5 minutes long. Which is one of the bits of a conversation translated and transcribed and translated by me. I don't remember. No, she didn't go there, I don't think, because Onkar was small then too. After coming here, they started. She was 7, she said. She would have started school then. She says she can't remember anything from here. I don't remember. Slowly, I forget more and more. What age would Auntie of Kuldeep have been? Like 1, 2? She must have been 2 years when you moved here. Kuldeep 65 ਦਾ ਕਦੀ ਦਾ ਪਿੱਛੋਂ ਹੋਇਆ ਪਰ ਜਸਵੰਤ ਹੋਇਆ ਫਿਰ Onkar Kuldeep ਛੋਟੀ ਸੀ Kuldeep such she was born earlier in 65. First Jaswant, then Onkar, then Kuldeep. She was young. So you moved in 67, so she was born in 65. Is that right? Yeah, she was 2 years old then. I came with your mum. I don't know how we managed to come over. I don't know, honestly. You know, when you moved here, did you miss India? And that's why we went to the police so many years after, about 4 or 5 years after. I don't know how many years after. First Preetham went to the police. That's so 10 years after. We said either send us back or that our father had called us over. You weren't happy here? Why? We weren't happy. Just because... Grandad used to get angry. He'd say, I'm going to go and complain, I'm going to go to the police. And Grandad injured himself, right? And he couldn't work, right?
What happened to you, Grandad? Alright, okay.
I fell down from the stairs and my arm got caught.
Did you dislocate your shoulder?
Grandad se pakke hoye right begina jara tole ferange right sanu pehla milk molk laaya se bhai ji ne bachchiyan da free milda se ne bachcha bhai ji ne sara band karata फिर पहले प्रीतम का क्या है
What he
Grandad wanted us to become official, right? How long will we wander around like this, right? At first, Baiji, he'd get us free milk for the children. The kids got it for free. Baiji stopped it all. First, Preetham went and did it.
stopped you from getting
milk बच्चन मिलता था पहला
The children got free milk back then.
like free milk?
हाँ
Why did he stop that?
ठीक है नहीं पता पुता लग गया तो वापस भेज देंगे कोई लेन देन से पैसा पूछा राइट बच्चे आना कुछ नहीं लेंगे राइट ग्रांडा रोज रोला पाਉਂਦਾ नहीं कहना मैं भाई आज जाके दाना मैं कहने तो दसना फिर पीत में पहला गए उन्होंने घर की लड़ाई रहती थी फिर पुलिस ऑफिस पहले ये गया राइट उन्होंने दसा साढ़े फादर ने इस तरह सद्या क्लेम नहीं तरह से करते वाधू तो दे जाते टैक्स इन्हें पासपोर्ट ले ले तो घर भेज दो तो पासपोर्ट आंदे फिर इन्हें सानू दस्या भी तुसी भी इवें करो फिर असीं जसवीर तो सलाह लई भी उन्होंने तो हो गया ठीक है असं भी चले जाए कहना मेरा हर जे रौला पै गया ना नहीं थोड़ा राइट वे वापस भेजेंगे अरे ठीक है भेज देना क्या चंगा जो बोल के मैं दस दिया जाओ
Which police station?
And he said, no, if someone finds out, then they'll send you back. He didn't used to give any money, right, for the children. He didn't give us anything, right? Grandad used to kick up a fuss every day. He'd say, I'm going to the police today to tell them. And I'd say, no, don't tell them, no, don't tell them. And then Preetham would go to the police. There were always arguments in their house. They went to the police office first, right? They told them that our father had called us over. See, they didn't claim much money and they kept giving it all to Dad. The police looked at their passports, sent them home. And they told us, you should do this too. So we asked Jasleen. We thought to ourselves, if it's happened for them, fine, we should do it too. And Jasleen said, if anything goes wrong in my house, then we'll send you back right away. We said, that's fine, send us. He said, fine, if anything happens, tell me. I've not heard their voices for quite a long time, so it's a bit emotional listening to that. I only realise while preparing this talk that the writing of the book, Be Like Teflon, coincided with a project, with Serpentine Projects, where I'm cooking and eating with up to 70 children, parents and carers in the Children's Centre in Edgware as a method for organising around housing rights, racial discrimination and the privatisation of public space. After 4 years, the work culminates in a series of resources that circulate in the community and via the NHS maternity service. There's something about the micropolitics of cooking and eating together that enables safety and dialogue about the macropolitics that shape our lives. Be Like Teflon ends with an essay, The Feeder and Feeding by Amanpreet Sandhu. It's going to read you a small section of it. Perhaps the strongest form of protest for a South Asian woman is not to be a feeder, or to not feed herself or others on time, to hate the smell of raw and cooked ingredients, to ignore well-preserved cooking methods and hand-me-down recipes, and to reevaluate the tastes, stories and memories we've been told to hold dear to us, to not feed on the pain and histories of others, and to not feed oneself for a collective cause, hunger strike, a refusal to eat food, often undertaken as a form of protest. Otago Street, Glasgow. Here is a building that I spent most of my childhood in. Here is the building where I discerned the real pragmatics of how to build and keep a community alive. 20 pairs of flip-flops, 80 stackable chairs, 100 tempered borosilicate mugs, 6 lengths of highly patterned carpet to take the stains of food. Here's how you DIY. Here's makeshift for 65 years. Here is belonging and unbelonging. Scholar and activist Ray Johnson says that social systems can be understood as functioning simultaneously on 3 interrelated levels. The macro level of government and social institutions, the meso level of organisations and communities, and micro level of individuals and small groups. As members of society, we are socialised across them, learn the rules of governing. In our families, classrooms, jobs, and communities, we learn what is okay by those who hold power, our parents, teachers, police, politicians. In Johnson's answers as to where social activism occurs, they quote Augusto Boal, saying, "The smallest incidents of our social life contain all the moral and political values of society, all its structures of domination and power, all its mechanisms and oppression." Kenmure Street, Pollokshields. In May 2021, the residents of Pollokshields spontaneously mobilised, halting a dawn raid and attempted deportation of Sumit Sukhdev and Lakhvir Singh. Protesters surround the Home Office immigration van. Some lie their bodies underneath to stop it from moving. Across the road is Tramway. On the gallery floor, an enlarged image of the protest sits alongside an image I found on Twitter from the year-long farmers' protests, Delhi, where farmers from all across India withheld their labour to demand the creation of a minimum support price, MSP bill, ensuring that corporations could no longer control pricing. In the pixelated image, Sikh farmers hold the protest line to allow fellow Muslim farmers to conduct namaz. I had these images on my studio wall for over a year as promises of solidarity. Adjacent to Tramway is Glasgow's first purpose-built Gurdwara, a building project managed by my uncle. I visit every day during install in the gallery next door, even though I'm the wrong kind of Sikh. Wow, Freudian slip. I'm far too questioning, not about capital G, God, but on the lost radical politics that underpin the Sikh movement. Pounding Pollokshields streets, my childhood neighbourhood, again pregnant, again Glasgow. I research a family of fascist temple builders from India, and I'm reminded of the story of a plan for a mosque to be built by my high school that was refused planning. 25 years later, the planning remains refused. Which buildings pose a threat? Which buildings are disappeared? What do architectures of liberation look like? I'm interested in structure, bodily, architectural, belief, how it holds up, what ideologies are built from within it. Between each threshold of the room, I place a series of keystones. 34 bottles of Gucci Rush, 86 cassette tapes of religious praise, foundational structures. The premise of the keystone is that forces are contingent on one another. If one is removed, the whole collapses. Ayodhya, India. On the gallery floor, a miniature reproduction of the 16th century Babri Masjid is cast in uranium glass and glows vivid fluorescent green when illuminated by an adjacent lamp. In 1992, the masjid was demolished by Hindu nationalists under the guise of a pilgrimage, after the claim that the mosque was built on the birthplace of the Hindu god Ram. A statue of Ram was placed in the mosque overnight and claimed to be divine intervention. The demolition of the mosque led to nationwide riots and was a pivotal moment in the rise of Hindu nationalism. In 2024, Narendra Modi inaugurated the Ram Mandir, a large palatial Hindu temple on the site, an overwriting of place and controlling of historic narrative. Uranium is naturally occurring in soil and mined for nuclear weaponry. I'm interested in how the wielding of the state appears in the home, in intimate and family relationships. This domestic mantelpiece-sized replica is an attempt at reconstruction and historical correction. Moga, Punjab. A colonial instrument which I grew up playing and praising on, automatically and repetitively plays a dissonant chord. It sits in relation to an image of land repatriation in 2021 between Muslims and Sikhs in the village of Moga, which I find from deep dives into local Punjabi newspapers. A brick is being passed along a circle of hands, where the ceremonial laying of foundations has begun for a mosque to be rebuilt which once stood there. The jazz musician Asher Gamadze speaks about the very colonial idea that tradition is static and fixed, when in fact he sees tradition as people grappling with their present. Begumpura, a classless, casteless, egalitarian state, imagined by the 15th century poet Ravidas. The 20-metre pollock-shield sky of the same name hangs in tramway. It is littered with the detritus of the neighbourhood. Import, export, cold wet feet, dusty heating in vans, cassette tapes full of pre-border love songs, salad rolls from Mackie D's, four-striped trackies, bile, dreams and debt. Something about this mess and this grit in the heavens, something about the political fight and the spiritual fight being in and of the same thing. Radcliffe Line, Lahore. Just like the director of Regeneration, the border is drawn remotely by a man with a master plan and subsequently pushes people around the place, triggering one of the largest and bloodiest mass migrations in history. The line was once a cultural centre and place of religious plurality. As an adult, I learn about the line erasing an almost 500-year practice of Muslim rababis composing and singing devotional music with Sikhs. Ariella Azuli might call this potential history, anti-colonial histories that are in need of excavation, nation-state projects and identities that are in need of refusal. I have been to the border once, and my memory of it, aged 8, is not solemn or violent. It's of my mum and auntie sat in front of me, trying, but failing, to cover up their uncontrollable, shoulder-shaking schoolgirl hysterics as the daily ceremony performed by Border Force Control begins. A choreography of aggressive legs whipping up to heads, synchronised spinning on the balls of feet. This smokescreen of patriotic readiness was met with streams of tears down cheeks of women in a defiant kind of laughter. He sped off from the border in his first car, red Ford Escort, Mark I, a symbol of aspiration, upward social mobility and unbounded freedom.
Yes, I apologise. There was someone else meant to be asking questions, but they've called in sick. So it's me, I'm sorry. But you've spoken now, so we can pretend they're not there and just have a blether. Thank you. That was an incredible lecture. I'm not sure I can forgive you for getting that song stuck in my head for the next 6 months, as you did in the summer. It somehow transported me back to a moment in, what was it, 1994? Anyway, so before we open to questions, I just had some thoughts and some questions I sort of wanted to start with. Because your lecture was so evocative, and it reminded me so much of going to see your work, Alter, and seeing your work in the past. As someone with ADHD, I'm always thinking a million things at once, but actually your work stops that thinking all at once, and something very solid takes over that's very indescribable, like a type of effect. And I'm left feeling moved or changed, or something is there. And I suppose I wanted to ask a little bit about this idea of storytelling, this idea of fragmentation. Even the lecture tonight was broken into components, each of them on their own, a topic of huge significance, importance, urgency, but somehow together they created something that goes beyond, something that's really effective. And I just wondered if you could talk about that sort of approach and what you hope to gain from it, or how it comes about.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, that thing that you said around, like, I think I'm noticing that I'm wanting, like, to satisfy lots of sensory desires, like, for me. Like, I want scent and I want touch, like carpet, or I want sound, but like really specific sound of like a car going past in the summer, and that kind of like thing that happens. What's it called? Is it called I should know this because we did it in the sound. Is it a Doppler? I can't remember. Anyway, there's really kind of specific sensory memory that I think I'm like working with. And then there's maybe that thing around like, which that diagram with the circles, and how I describe how Doreen Massey, this incredible feminist Marxist geographer, she talks about this local and global. Like at the start of the year, I was reading a whole range of like books, and it kept coming back to this thing of like being like, you could see the speck of dust on the table, but then this massive other force is like over there. And that thing, that kind of like telescopic, major, minor, that scale shift is something that I'm really working with right now at the moment. I guess the work at Hollybush Gardens now, which is on now, is starting to sit with that a wee bit more. And I felt like I was definitely sitting with it in Alter. But there's something that happens when you put, maybe when a female artist puts like, and maybe also a female racialized artist puts something vaguely domestic in a space, or vaguely like about family, that like I was trying to push against, like, oh, I'm not interested in biography for the sake of biography. I'm not interested in nostalgia. It's like, it's that minor, major, that scale shift. Like, I'm interested in that. So I don't know if that answers what you asked.
No, it does. I mean, what really struck me was just how much the past isn't the past, but the past is present.
Yeah.
And the presence of the past at all times. I mean, with autobiography as well, what also came across was really striking was that it's not just your biography. It's like an intra-subjective set of biographies working together. Could you talk a little bit about that sort of collaborative process? You know, you sort of spoke about it towards the end, but the piece in Rochdale, I just thought it's such an incredible piece of art. How do you go from initial conversations to those films which are quite experimental and poetic?
I mean, it's an amazing quote. Is it Mariam Kaba that says, everything worthwhile is done together? Is that the quote? I might have totally butchered that. But I think there's a bit of that. And like, okay, there's loads of pragmatic stuff, like that was the commission that you get invited to do. They wanted it to, they wanted you to do something that worked with other people. And actually in that archive, that very ethnic minorities section of the archive in Rochdale that we were studying, there's loads of evidence of like arts funding and community engagement happening through arts funding right after a big moment of like rupture, like societal unrest, like riots or 9/11, or like these, the minute something happens, it's like a sticking plaster or something. It was kind of interesting to watch that occur again and again. And so there was a bit of like, I think in that project specifically, and actually maybe in even more recently in Thamesmead, there's so many actors in the work, as in not like there's the funder, there's the commissioner, there's the institution, and then there's like the group who like that's their neighbourhood most of the time. And I think sometimes, and then there's the artist. And I find that one of the things that I always feel like I need to do in that situation is to be really transparent with the group about like the currency of this, like the currency of them being engaged. And then once you're upfront about that, you can start to be selective about what you do, which is, we felt really mischievous, or like I encouraged mischief. I didn't want us to do oral histories. I didn't want, I felt like we wanted to maybe just do something a bit different or something that didn't, that was also an HLF funded project, so really specific needs. It's not Arts Council, you had to tick a heritage kind of box. So there was a funny dance of like, how do we get away with saying that this is heritage? Or like, it was really fun. It also was a long time, many, many years of work. I think I received it was called the Up Projects Award by Up Projects, who are a London-based arts organisation, in 2016, and went through the whole funding process. And we worked right the way through the pandemic. And was that 2021? I think it was 2021. So that's how long things should be funded for, I think. Especially if you're working with quote unquote disengaged groups.
How important is the idea of mischief in all the work you do? Because there's something, I don't know, the way you finished, there's always something that just lifts something. I don't know, whenever I see anything you do or talk about, I don't know whether you like hope or whatever, but something that sort of feels mischievous, that it's, well, you talked about breaking structure and dismantling structures, that sort of recartographer, like making new mappings of something. I don't know.
I'm a third child, a bit of a clown. I don't know. I was a bit of a clown growing up. I don't know. Got taught by Carl Clerkin, I don't know. And Hans Stouffer.
They have a lot to blame.
Yeah, I think I was in a department that allowed for that kind of play, even though I wasn't like getting like in an art. When I teach in a kind of fine art department now, and I just keep thinking about, I didn't get that, or I wasn't getting any of that kind of, like the lecture strand was different, right? Or that kind of, I didn't know what a crit was until I started teaching in an art school, in the way that you do in an art school. But why am I saying that? I don't know. But what I feel like what I feel like I did get was like this, like total joy of material. Like I take it really seriously, and it isn't flippant. It might look flippant, but it takes like a long time to be like, yep, it's that. Or like to edit out. You know what it's like. Like the editing process is like, I totally love it and I hate it all at the same time.
I'm always amazed by like the very specific details of your practice, which sometimes people don't see. Like the urethane cast bus, I just thought was an incredible piece of work, just because of the specificity of the materiality and the way that they were mixed and poured and cast. There was something very explicit between the stories of the material and the stories that the busts were telling. I'm very keen that I don't talk too much, so I think what I'll do is I'll pass it over to audience, questions from the audience.
Sorry, I just want to say thank you, Jasleen. Thank you, Jonathan, as well. It was such a privilege to hear you speak. And a lot of the things that you spoke about, I guess for myself, I was very familiar with many of the things that I see in the work. As someone of South Asian heritage. And I just wrote some things down, but I just wanted to ask you, your work sort of moves across intimate experience and cultural memory and political structures. And now, with a very, very visible and very public platform, how have you navigated how do you keep your work from being framed in ways that may not kind of reflect the complexity within them, because they are, you're speaking of very complex things, I feel. And I just wonder if, that kind of pressure for you has changed, that sort of pressure of being representative, of being legible, of being, now, has that kind of intensified, or is that something that actually you don't need to really kind of contend with anymore at this point?
Thank you for your question. You're making me think of a few things. A really pragmatic response would be like, I really enjoy working with trusted people to write about my work in a way that is able to hold it all. So that's been something that maybe so Amanpreet, who writes in Be Like Teflon, has written a text for the show at Hollybush just now. There's something around I really respect, and I'm not looking for new writers. I'm looking to I really trust her as a writer. I think she's an incredible writer, and someone that has been with my work for quite a long time, which helps, I think. So yeah, there is controlling the narrative yourself, and the other part of your question around maybe visibility and stuff, I don't know. I think I guess my gut response to that was this generations above or before me that have been producing such rich work. So I don't feel like the first or anything like that. And actually, maybe there's a bit of a privilege right now where I can just get my head down and make work rather than have to kind of explain it away or something like that. Yeah.
Can I add to that question? Just because you're talking about collaborating with writers so that you have an open dialogue about the work, but I suppose now, being an artist in the public realm, you also have to face written criticism from out with that collaboration. And how do you deal with that? Ignore it, or?
I don't know. No, I read it all. I don't mind it. I don't get much. I don't know. Okay. I don't mind. I don't mind. Yeah, I don't mind. I think there's some work that I like. I'm feeling like I'm in a. I think Alter felt like a big. I felt like I was just beginning. It's I feel like I've been resourced by Tramway to make work that I can really stand behind. So yeah, I feel like I'm just beginning in a way. Yeah.
Mandy, you had a question.
You quoted quite a lot from different writers about your work, and that's been followed up by what you've just said. Would you like to share your interest in other sort of, and you've also quoted a musician, the jazz musician, but other people working in the visual domain, and what you particularly value there, wherever it's from?
Do you mean artists specifically?
Yeah, artists, design, any kind of thing other than words, really.
Yeah, like, I can tell you who my favourite artists are. Adam Farah Saad, who's just an exceptional maker, and like, I feel like makes work that is like really emotional, but also just like, you know, it's so sharp. It's incredible the way they work with material. As someone that like was formally educated in a place where like you're looking at like, is the thing doing the thing? Is it made well? Is it whatever? There's someone that's just exceptional. And another artist that I absolutely love is Emma Abassi Okon, who I think does the same thing, like works with, I think actually works with secrets quite a lot. I think there's a lot unsaid in the work, but like that's okay. Like to Alia Said, who I mentioned, who's a filmmaker, also from Glasgow. I was doing a talk with her years ago, and she once said she does this incredible thing with translation in her work, where in a film you might be seeing something, hearing something else, and reading something else. And it felt like such a power move. And like this was work she was making as a student in the Slade in like the 90s. But she said in a talk once, like, you don't need to know me to like care for me, or something like that. And there was, I think, that thing that I think I've learned from, I mean, Emma and Adam are not, we're all the same kind of age, but Alia being maybe a generation above, like there's something that is to be learned from that generation around, like not having to explain it all. She's someone that really influenced that, I think, that kind of what you can hold back.
So one thing I've heard you talk about a fair amount during this lecture was this, I guess I would phrase it, a clash between local and global. And I suppose it brings me back to reading Thomas Friedman's The Lexus and the Olive Tree. He published that theorist article in 1999 in which he talked about how like this specter of modernization following a lot of like Reagan Thatcher era policy has really clashed with the local tradition, and how there's almost like a golden straitjacket that the global periphery gets put into when you project a lot of modernization onto them. And that was published in 1999. And I think since then, there's been a lot of exponential growth within globalization and global theory, which leads me to believe that there might be, I don't know, I mean, this is a personal belief, but a declining amount of emotional currency around the viewership of this kind of narrative, like global and local and maybe corporate or Western ideals projected onto more global periphery communities. Do you think that some of your works might get lost in translation as time progresses and the local and global kind of merge and become more homogenous? Or, I don't know, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, if more communities arise around this local global rift, do you think more people will, I guess, see the inherent meaning in your works?
I don't know. I don't think I'm working with that binary necessarily, the kind of east-west. I think I use that metaphor, or like the essay that Doreen writes about, I think it's called something, The Local and the Global. You could Google it and find a PDF. I think what she's doing in that is like many things, one of which is like trying to debunk the very moment we are all living through, where there's like kind of fictions of nationalism start sprouting, or like this kind of internal view about a place, and the power geometries that then circulate because of these imaginaries. She talks about like the geographical imagination a lot. And so that thing that she does where she's trying to like mess up a view of a place, or like mess up a narrative of a place, I think is what she's meaning. I don't know, I feel like we might need to talk about that over a drink or something. Anyone else has got any answers to that one?
So in a minute, we're going to go for a drink and share a drink together. But we spend less and less time together, not you and I, but families, like iPhones and stuff. You were talking about like the radicality of commensality, of being together, of eating together. I was wondering if you could talk about that, because it sort of flies in the face of the breakneck speed at which we tend to be living.
I think in the context of the work that I mentioned it in, like Be Like Teflon or working in a children's centre, it's really practical. It's a tool to feed people. I'm not going to theorise it any more than that.
Okay.
Sorry, is that all right?
That's fine.
I really want a drink.
Right, I'm your whiskey. Any other questions? If so, okay. Before we go and we have a drink, I just want to thank a few people, because this lecture takes place every year. Firstly, the committee and Debica Ray for putting Jasleen forward for this year's talk. And me, yeah. Debica's unfortunately not here. She's currently in India and sends her apologies. But I also want to thank Julia Velez, who is the administrator of Applied Art, who helps us put on this talk every year. I don't know where she's gone, but if we could give her a round of applause, it'd be much appreciated. And also just a quick thanks to the people with our roving mics, Mary and Karen, Chris, who's filming this today, and Kyle, who's been filming it. It's all enormously appreciated. Thank you very much. And let's all get a glass of wine.